Welcome to Jolene's Stories, where a woman who gave everything finally reclaims it.
My name is Marguerite Holloway. I'm 63 years old, and on a Tuesday afternoon in early November, my phone buzzed against the kitchen counter with a voice note from my daughter-in-law, Tessa. She didn't mean to send it to me. She meant to send it to her friend Brittany, whose name sits 2 rows above mine in her contacts because she has me saved as Mom H. The buzz came while I was rinsing a coffee mug, the white one Walter bought me in Charleston the summer before his heart gave out. I dried my hands on the towel and I pressed play, expecting one of those breezy little updates Tessa sometimes sent, a recipe she wanted, a Target run she was making, a question about whether I had any of Craig's old soccer photos. Instead, I heard her laugh, the laugh she keeps for people she's relaxed with. And then I heard her say it. Marguerite is basically the family bank. Smile, cry, collect. Diane and I have it down to a science. 22 words. And then a pause. And then she added, "Honestly, Britt, she eats it up." My hands were steady when I pressed play on that voice note, but my heart was not. Welcome back to the channel. If you've ever found out all at once that the people you've been pouring yourself into were running a quiet calculation behind your back, if you've ever heard the real voice underneath the loving one, then please take a moment right now to like this video and subscribe. It costs you nothing, and it tells the algorithm that stories like mine deserve to be heard by other people who have lived inside this exact silence. Drop a comment with the city you're listening from. I read every single one, and I want to know where in this country there is someone else nodding along, recognizing the shape of what I'm about to describe. This channel exists for people who have been generous to the point of disappearing, and who are finally ready to come back into focus. To understand how I got from that voice note to the Sunday brunch where I laminated the truth and set it down on my own dining table in front of 13 relatives, you have to go back. You have to go back to the morning Walter died, because that is when the door I am about to describe was left open. Walter and I were married for 38 years. He was a structural engineer for the Virginia Department of Transportation, the kind of man who measured twice and cut once, and saved every receipt in a shoebox labeled by year. We paid off this colonial in 2011, the year our son Craig graduated college, and Walter stood in the front yard with his hands on his hips and said, "Mar, this house is ours. Free and clear. Nobody can take this from us." 2 years ago, on a Saturday morning in March, Walter went out to bring in the newspaper, and he sat down on the porch swing, and he did not get up. The neighbor found him. The newspaper was still folded in his lap. I had been making coffee in the kitchen, the French press he insisted on because he said drip coffee was for people who didn't respect the bean. When the neighbor knocked, I was pouring the water in slow circles the way Walter taught me. I have not been able to fully describe, even now, the silence that came into the house that afternoon. It was not the silence of a room. It was the silence of an entire life, pausing to look at me and ask, "What are you going to do now?" I did what a lot of widows do. I tried to fill the silence with people. I called Craig more often. I invited him and Tessa over for dinner every Sunday. I started saying yes to things I might once have thought about for a few days. Tessa is 31, and she has the kind of face that photographs beautifully. She runs an Instagram account where she posts what she calls soft living content, flat lays of her morning routine, her $30 candles, her white linen sheets, her gold-rimmed coffee cups. Craig, who is 34, works as a middle manager at an insurance broker downtown. He is a good boy. He has always been a good boy. He is also, and I say this with the clarity that only comes after the fact, the kind of man who lets the louder voice in the room make the decisions. Tessa was the louder voice. From the moment she met him at a friend's wedding, she had been the louder voice. And after Walter died, I did not have the strength to be a louder voice than hers. I did not want to be. I wanted, more than anything, to be folded into a family that still felt like a family. The first ask came 8 months after the funeral. Tessa needed a car. Her old Hyundai had thrown a transmission, and she had been making content about how she was manifesting an upgrade. She came over on a Wednesday with a leasing brochure for a midsize SUV, the kind with the third row she did not need because she did not have children. She sat at my kitchen table, and she put her hand over mine, and she said, "Marguerite, I would not ask if I didn't know you would understand. I just need a cosigner, just for the credit. $22,000 over the term. We'll handle the payments." Craig nodded next to her. I co-signed. I told myself it was nothing. It was a piece of paper. It was what families did. The SUV showed up in my driveway 6 days later, white with cream interior, and Tessa posted a photo of herself standing next to it captioned, "Grateful for a season of growth." She did not tag me. She did not mention me. I told myself that was fine, because I had not done it for credit. I had done it for love. Then Diane started coming to dinner. Diane is Tessa's mother, 61, divorced twice, currently living in a rental in Glen Allen that she claims is transitional. She is a small, sharp woman with a laugh that arrives slightly before the joke does. The first time she came to a family dinner, she brought a bottle of red wine and said, "Marguerite, I have been dying to meet the woman who raised the man who deserves my daughter." That sentence sat under my ribs for the rest of the night. By the third dinner, she was a fixture. By the fifth, she was bringing her own slippers and leaving them by my back door. And somewhere around the 6th or 7th dinner, she mentioned very lightly, almost as an aside, that she was paying for dental implants, full upper arch, and the bill was $9,600, and she was just sick about it. Tessa reached across the table and squeezed her mother's hand and said, "Mom, you shouldn't have to carry that alone." And then both of them looked at me. Just for a moment. Just long enough. I wrote the check the next morning. She's practically family, I told myself. That's what I said into the silence of my kitchen. She's practically family. I want to be honest about what was happening inside me during this period, because I think it is the part of the story most people overlook. I was not stupid. I had spent 31 years as a forensic accountant for a mid-size firm in Richmond. I had testified in 7 federal cases. I had unwound shell companies and traced wire transfers across 4 continents. My professional life was the careful, patient work of seeing what people did not want me to see. And yet, inside my own house, in my own grief, I had drawn a circle around my family and decided that the rules I applied to strangers did not apply to them. I had decided that to look closely would be to insult them, so I did not look. I wrote the checks and I signed the papers, and I told myself I was lucky to have anyone left to spend money on. I was wrong about being lucky, but I would not understand the shape of how wrong for almost 2 more years. The phone plan was the next thing, and it happened so gradually I never made a decision about it. Craig had been on my family plan since he was 16. When he got married, we had talked vaguely about him moving to his own account. He never did. It stayed on my bill, and his line stayed active, and after a while Tessa's line appeared on it too, and then a tablet, and then an Apple Watch. The car insurance, same thing. He had been on my policy in college, and the policy had renewed every 6 months, and somewhere along the way, Tessa's SUV was added to it, and I had nodded when the agent called, and I had said yes. That was fine. The streaming subscriptions, Netflix, Hulu, Disney, the premium one for the gym app, were all on a credit card with my name on it, billed to my checking account. When I finally sat down one evening and added it up, just to see, just out of curiosity, the number was $743 per month. $743 per month, every month, for 2 grown adults who lived in their own condo, drove their own cars, and posted photos of themselves drinking $18 lattes. I did not say anything. That is the part I have to confess. I saw the number, and I closed the spreadsheet, and I made myself a cup of tea, and I told myself that this was what mothers did. This was what grandmothers did, except I did not have grandchildren, and Tessa had told me with great emphasis that she and Craig were not on a timeline. I told myself the 743 was a small price for being needed. I told myself the alternative was sitting in this colonial alone with Walter's empty chair across the table. I told myself a lot of things that, in retrospect, were just different ways of saying I was afraid of the silence. Then came the baby shower. Tessa's friend Brittany, yes, the same Brittany who would later receive the voice note that ended up with me, was pregnant, and Tessa volunteered my house as the venue. She did not ask. She announced. She called me on a Tuesday and said, "Marguerite, I told Britt she could do her shower at your place. It's so much prettier than her apartment, and I already booked the caterer. They need a card on file." The catering bill, when it landed, was $3,200. She had charged it to my American Express because she had the number saved from when I had ordered Craig's birthday dinner the year before. I did not dispute the charge. I did not call her. I hosted the shower. I smiled at 30 women I had never met. I let Brittany hug me and call me a saint. And I watched Tessa flutter around the rented dessert table taking photographs, and I understood, in a small, dim, distant way, that I was no longer a person in my own house. I was a setting. Diane in the garage happened around the same time. She arrived one Saturday with her boyfriend's pickup truck and 3 pieces of furniture, a sectional, an armoire, a glass coffee table, and she said, "Marguerite, just for a few weeks. The rental's getting fumigated." I said yes. The few weeks became a few months. The few months became 8 months. By the time I noticed that Diane had let herself in with a spare key, a key I had not given her, a key Tessa must have copied, the garage was full. There was no room for my car. I parked in the driveway in the rain that whole autumn, and I told myself it was fine. I told myself I was a generous woman. I told myself Walter would have been proud of me. I do not believe now that Walter would have been proud of me. I think Walter would have said, very quietly, "Mar, look at what you're allowing." But Walter was not there to say it. So nobody said it, and I did not say it to myself. The proposal arrived at Easter on the same day Tessa hugged me and called me the heart of the family. We were sitting in the living room after the ham. Tessa had a folder with her. She put it on the coffee table and she opened it, and inside was a printed spreadsheet. Neat columns, a small chart, projected numbers. The header read, "Holloway Family Living Optimization Plan." She walked me through it like she was pitching a client. She and Craig would move into the colonial. They would take the master bedroom, which they would refer to as the couple's suite. I would take the back bedroom, the small one over the garage, which she had labeled Mom's Quiet Zone. They would rent out their condo for $2,100 a month. That money would go into household reserves. The framing was elder care. She used that phrase 3 times. "It's just smart elder care, Marguerite. You shouldn't be alone in this big house. You shouldn't be carrying it." Diane was sitting next to her, nodding, nodding, nodding. Craig was looking at the carpet. I said I would think about it. I went into the bathroom and I splashed water on my face, and I looked at myself in the mirror, and for the first time in 2 years I saw the woman Walter had been married to. She was angry. She was paying attention. And she said, in a voice I had not heard from myself since the day before he died, "No, absolutely not." But I did not say it out loud. Not yet. The cousin's text came 3 weeks later. Craig's cousin Lauren, a woman I had known since she was 6 years old, a woman who had been a flower girl at our wedding, sent me a screenshot. It was a text exchange between her and Tessa from the previous Saturday. Tessa had written, "Honestly, Lauren, Marguerite owes us. Walter left her way more than one old woman needs, and Craig is her only kid. She should be making it easy on us not playing the widow card. Lauren had written back, "Tessa, that's awful." And Tessa had written, "Don't be dramatic, you know I'm right." Lauren had sent me the screenshot with one line of her own. "Marguerite, I'm sorry. You need to see this." I sat on my back porch for a long time after I read it. The light was getting low. The maple in the yard was the color of a struck match. I did not cry. I want to be clear about that. I had cried enough in the past 2 years for 10 lifetimes. What I felt instead was something colder and more useful. I felt 31 years of professional muscle wake up inside me. I felt the part of myself that had unwound the Petersburg embezzlement case in 2007 sit up straight and crack her knuckles. I felt Marguerite Holloway, forensic accountant, come back into the room. And then, on that Tuesday in November, the voice note arrived. The misdirected one. The 22 words. I listened to it 3 times. Then I poured myself a small glass of the bourbon Walter kept in the cabinet above the refrigerator, and I sat down at my kitchen table with a yellow legal pad, and I began to write. The first thing I wrote at the top of the page was a date. The date was November 4th. The second thing I wrote, underneath it, was the word audit. And the third thing I wrote, in the smaller handwriting I used to use when I was annotating evidence binders for federal prosecutors, was subjects, Tessa Holloway, Diane Marsh, Craig Holloway. I underlined Craig's name twice and put a question mark next to it, because I did not yet know how much he knew. That question mark would matter later. It would matter very much. That weekend, I ran the audit. I cleared the dining room table, the one Walter had bought me for our 25th anniversary, and I laid out 4 years of bank statements, credit card statements, Venmo histories, Zelle transfers, and check registers. I had kept everything, of course. A forensic accountant's house is never short on records. I pulled it all up on my laptop, and I built a spreadsheet from scratch, and I categorized every outgoing dollar that had ever touched Tessa or Craig or Diane. I worked from 8 in the morning on Saturday until nearly midnight, ate a sandwich standing at the counter, slept for 6 hours, and started again at 6 on Sunday. By Sunday evening, the spreadsheet had 473 rows. The total at the bottom, in bold, was $87,412. $87,412 in 4 years, 48 months, an average of $1,820 a month, every month, gone from my accounts and into theirs, in pieces small enough that I had never seen the whole. But the spreadsheet was only the beginning. The spreadsheet was the visible river. What I wanted to know was where the river ended. So on Monday morning, I opened the laptop again and I went looking for Tessa. I did not need a private investigator. I had 31 years of knowing where money goes when people think they have hidden it. Within 40 minutes, I had found her Vanguard brokerage account. She had used the email address I had set up for her in 2019, the one tied to a recovery phone that was, ironically, on my family plan. The account had been opened 18 months earlier. The current balance was $34,116. The deposits, when I pulled the transaction history, lined up almost perfectly with the dates of large gifts I had given her and Craig. Birthday checks, Christmas checks, the down payment help on their condo, a vacation fund I had contributed to last spring. She had been taking the money I gave to my son, and she had been routing it into a personal investment account in her name alone. Craig's name was not on it. Craig did not know it existed. I closed the laptop very carefully. I did not slam it. I closed it the way you close the lid on something you intend to come back to. The next thing I found was Craig's emergency credit card, the one I had given him 5 years ago. For true emergencies, Craig, please, only for emergencies. And the statements showed $6,100 over the past 14 months at restaurants, golf courses, and a place called the Hampton Roads Cigar Lounge. No emergencies, just appetites. And the last thing I found, the one that made me actually laugh out loud in my empty kitchen, was Diane's dental implant invoice. I had requested a copy from her dentist's office under the pretext of needing it for a tax matter, and the office manager, a kind woman who did not know what she was helping me uncover, faxed it to me on a Tuesday afternoon. The total bill was $4,200, not $9,600. $4,200. Diane had pocketed $5,400 of my money and gone on vacation to Sedona with it. There were photos on her Facebook. She had tagged Tessa in them. I called Ed Pierce on Wednesday. Ed and I had worked together for 19 years at the firm. He retired a year before I did, and he ran a small forensic CPA consultancy out of his house in Midlothian. I told him I needed a second set of eyes, professional courtesy, and I asked if he could come over Thursday morning. He came at 9. I made him coffee in Walter's French press. We sat at the dining room table, and I walked him through everything: the spreadsheet, the brokerage account, the dental invoice, the phone plan, the garage, the cousin screenshot, the voice note. He listened without interrupting. He took notes in pencil on a yellow legal pad of his own. When I finished, he set his pen down. He removed his glasses. He did not speak for 11 seconds. I know it was 11 seconds because I counted them. And then he said, very evenly, "Marguerite, what you're describing is structured financial exploitation of a senior. These patterns would interest Adult Protective Services. You have grounds for civil action, possibly criminal. The evidence is clean." He paused. "What do you want to do?" I told him I did not want to sue. I did not want to call the police. I wanted something quieter and more permanent than that. I wanted to stop. He looked at me for a long time. Then he said, "Marguerite, that may be the most expensive thing you can do to them. Withdrawal is its own consequence." I told him I had a Sunday in mind. He nodded once. He said, "Make sure you have a witness." I told him I had a dining room. That weekend, I began my preparation. I called my sister-in-law, Helen, who lives in Williamsburg, and who had been Walter's closest sibling. I told her some of it. Not all, just enough. And I asked her to come to a Sunday brunch at my house on the 17th. I called Lauren, the cousin who had sent me the screenshot, and I invited her too. I called Craig's Uncle Bill, Walter's brother, who had never warmed to Tessa and had always been polite about it. I called my neighbors, the Patels, who had loved Walter and who had brought me casseroles for 4 months after the funeral. I called my old college friend Beverly, who had known me since I was 20. I called Tessa and Craig and Diane last. I made it warm. I made it irresistible. I said I wanted to celebrate everyone, that I missed having the house full, that I was making Walter's recipe for biscuits. Tessa said she would bring mimosa fixings. Diane said she would bring her famous fruit salad. I said that sounded lovely. I said I could not wait. In the week between the invitation and the brunch, Tessa came over twice with what I now understood was the villain's charm offensive. On Wednesday, she dropped in unannounced with a paper bag of homemade chocolate chip cookies, and she sat at my counter while I made tea, and she told me she had been thinking a lot about gratitude lately. She said the word 3 times. She had a small wrapped present for me, a ceramic coffee mug with the words, "World's Best Mom," printed on it in gold script. She watched my face while I unwrapped it. I made the face she needed me to make. I hugged her, and I felt my skin crawl. She came back Friday with a small bouquet of grocery store tulips. I almost lost my nerve that Friday. I almost called the whole thing off, because the human part of me, the soft part, the part that had been so afraid of being alone, looked at her on my back porch with her tulips and her cardigan and her bright, clean face. And it said, "What if you are wrong? What if the spreadsheet is wrong? What if Ed is wrong? What if this is just a family, and you are about to break it? And then I went into my office, and I opened the laptop, and I looked one more time at the Vanguard balance, $34,116, in her name alone, funded with my checks. And the soft part of me went very quiet. And the other part, the part that had survived Walter's death and was about to survive this, said, Sunday. We are doing this Sunday. She almost saw the laptop once. She came in through the back door on Wednesday faster than I expected, and I had the bank portal open on the kitchen counter. I closed the lid in one motion and turned around with a smile already in place, and she said, What are you working on? And I said, Just bills, sweetheart. You know how it is at the end of the year. And she nodded and reached for the cookie tin she had brought, and the moment passed. But it cost me a half-hour of recovery. After she left, I moved the laptop to the office and put a passcode on the lock screen for the first time in 3 years. The morning of the brunch, I woke up at 5. I made Walter's coffee. I sat on the porch with my crossword for 40 minutes, while the sky turned the color of a peach. I went back inside, and I set the dining room table for 13. White tablecloth, the good china, the Lenox that had been my mother's, Walter's mother's silver, fresh flowers in the center, lilies and eucalyptus. I baked the biscuits at 7. I roasted a frittata at 8. I made the pitcher of fresh orange juice Tessa would later use for her mimosas. And at 9 in the morning, while the house was still quiet and smelled of butter and rosemary, I went into my office and I picked up the stack of laminated single-page summaries that I had spent Saturday afternoon preparing at the Office Depot on West Broad. There were 13 of them. Each one was identical. Each one had a header that read, Holloway Family Financial Summary, November 2009 to November 2013. Each one had a clean, simple table of figures. Each one ended at the bottom in bold with the total, $87,412. I tucked them into a manila folder, and I slid the folder into the bottom drawer of Walter's old cabinet in the dining room, behind the napkins. Then I went into the kitchen to wait. They started arriving at 10:30. Helen first, with a hug that I held a little longer than usual. Then the Patels, then Beverly, then Bill, then Lauren, who gave me a look across the foyer that said she understood something was about to happen and she was not going to ask. Craig and Tessa and Diane arrived together at 10:50. Tessa was wearing a cream cashmere sweater and the diamond studs I had given her for her 28th birthday. Diane was carrying her fruit salad in a glass bowl that I recognized as one of mine, one she had taken home from a previous dinner and never returned. Craig kissed me on the cheek. He smelled like aftershave and the gym. I smiled at all of them. I said, Come in, come in. Everything's almost ready. Tessa squeezed my arm. She said, Marguerite, the table looks gorgeous. You really outdid yourself. She had no idea. None of them did. The 13th guest was the portable Bluetooth speaker I had set up the night before on the sideboard, the small black one Craig had given me last Christmas, paired and ready and charged. We sat down at 11. I had arranged the seating carefully. Tessa to my left, Diane next to Tessa, Craig across from me, Lauren 2 seats down from Tessa with a clear view, Helen at the other end of the table where she could see everyone. The biscuits went around. The frittata went around. The mimosas were poured. Conversation rose and fell. The Patel's new grandchild. Beverly's recent trip to Asheville. Bill's golf swing. I let it run for almost 40 minutes. I let everyone have a second helping. I let Tessa tell the story she had been telling for a year about how she and Craig had met. I watched her perform. I watched Diane laugh at the right moments. I watched Craig's 8-year-old nephew, Sam, Bill's grandson who was visiting from Roanoke, sit very still at the corner of the table eating his biscuit in small, careful bites. At 11:40, I stood up. I tapped my water glass with the edge of my spoon. The table quieted, Tessa smiled at me, expectant. She loved a toast. She loved being in the audience of a toast. I said, I want to thank all of you for being here. I have been thinking, since Walter passed, about what family really means, about what it asks of us, and what it gives back. And I have prepared something I would like to share with all of you this morning. It will take just a few minutes. I would ask you to please hold your questions until I am finished. There was a small ripple around the table. Helen folded her hands in her lap. Lauren's eyes flicked to mine. Tessa's smile did not move, but I saw her right hand find her mimosa glass. I walked to Walter's cabinet. The brass pull was cold under my fingers. I opened the bottom drawer. The wood made the small, dry sound it had always made, the sound I had heard 10,000 times over 25 years of pulling napkins from that drawer for 10,000 dinners. I took out the manila folder. I walked back around the table, slowly, the way you walk in a church, and one by one I placed a laminated sheet face down in front of each guest. 13 sheets. 13 plates pushed slightly aside to make room. The laminate caught the chandelier light in small, wet rectangles as I set each one down. I had rehearsed this walk in my head for 6 nights. The carpet under my feet was the same carpet Walter and I had picked out in 1998. When I got to Tessa, I placed her sheet in front of her with the same gentleness I had placed everyone else's, and she looked up at me with the smallest hairline crack appearing at the edge of her smile. I returned to my seat. I sat down. I smoothed the napkin in my lap. I said, "Please, turn them over." 13 hands turned 13 sheets. The sound of 13 pieces of laminated paper meeting 13 pieces of china was a small, dry, simultaneous click that I will hear for the rest of my life. There was a single collective inhale around the table. Small, audible, the sound of a room reading the same number at the same time. $87,412. The Patels looked at each other. Mrs. Patel's hand went to the small gold cross at her throat. Bill set his fork down. The fork made a clear ringing sound against the Lennox, and nobody flinched at it. Lauren's eyes went immediately to Tessa. Helen's eyes went to me, and they were already wet. Diane's face, and I will remember this for the rest of my life, Diane's face drained of color in 3 distinct waves, from her hairline down to her chin, like a window blind being lowered. Craig was reading. He was just reading. His fork was still in his hand, hovering, forgotten. A bead of hollandaise was sliding down the tines, and he did not notice. The chandelier above us was the chandelier Walter had hung himself in. 1996, and the light from it landed on the laminated sheet in front of Craig and made the bold number at the bottom look as if it were lit from underneath. If you are listening to this right now, and you have ever sat at a table with people who only call you generous when they need something, and selfish the moment you stop, please understand something. That voice in your head, the one that tells you that to look closely is to be ungrateful, the one that tells you that asking for an accounting is a betrayal. That voice is the voice of the people who benefit from your silence. It is not yours. Have you ever added up exactly what your kindness has cost you? Not the dollars. The dollars are the easy part. The other things, the Sundays, the dignity, the version of yourself who knew her own worth. Add those up. And then ask yourself who has been keeping the only ledger that ever mattered. I let the silence at the table sit for a count of 10. I counted in my head the way I used to count seconds for a deposition camera. Nobody spoke. Nobody coughed. Nobody picked up a glass. The hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen was the loudest thing in the house. Then I said, "There is one more thing I want you to hear." I picked up my phone from beside my water glass. The phone was warm in my hand from the sun coming through the dining room window. I tapped the speaker icon. I tapped the voice memo. The Bluetooth connected with a small audible click, and the speaker on the sideboard, the small black one Craig had given me last Christmas, woke up with a single green pinpoint of light. And Tessa's laugh came out of it. Her real laugh, the one she keeps for Brittany. the one I had heard for the first time 12 days earlier on a Tuesday afternoon in my kitchen. Marguerite is basically the family bank. Smile, cry, collect. Diane and I have it down to a science. 22 words. Honestly, Britt, she eats it up. I tapped the screen. The voice note ended. The green light on the speaker went out. The room did not move. Tessa's fork was suspended in the air halfway between her plate and her mouth, and a small piece of frittata fell from it onto the white tablecloth. And nobody, not one person, looked at the frittata. Everyone was looking at Tessa. She tried to laugh. That is the part I want to be very precise about. She tried to laugh, and the laugh came out as a small wet click in the back of her throat, and then it died. And then she said, Marguerite, that's so out of context. You don't understand. Her voice broke on the word understand. She tried again. Britt and I were, it was a joke. It was a stupid joke. The sentence did not finish. The sentence collapsed in the middle the way a folding chair collapses when you sit on it wrong, and Diane beside her said in a high, panicked voice, That's not... Tessa was joking. That was a joke between friends. Marguerite, sweetheart, you know how girls talk. The word sweetheart hung in the air for a second and then withered. Nobody had ever heard Diane call me sweetheart before. The word sounded like a coin she had pulled from a wrong pocket. And then I did the thing I had decided I would do. I did not raise my voice. I did not stand up again. I simply slid one more piece of paper out of the folder, not laminated, just printed. The paper was warm from sitting against the laminated sheets, and the edge of it caught very slightly on the tablecloth as I pushed it. I placed it across the table in front of Craig. Craig, I said, this is your wife's personal Vanguard brokerage account. The balance is $34,116. The deposits over the last 18 months come from gifts I made to the two of you. Your name is not on this account. I am sorry that you are learning about it this way. Craig went very still. He picked up the paper. He read it. He read it a second time. I watched his eyes move across the columns. I watched the moment he found the line item dated June 12th. The Christmas in June check I had written for their anniversary, $3,000, deposited 11 days later into the account he did not know existed. Then he reached into his pocket and he took out his phone and he opened his banking app. I watched him do this. We all watched him do this. And he scrolled. His thumb moved up the screen in small, slow flicks. His face changed. Not all at once, in layers. First confusion, then something younger. Something that looked like a boy who has just been told the lights in his bedroom were on a timer his mother controlled. Then a slow, dawning recognition that was almost the saddest thing I had ever seen on my son's face. He looked up at his wife. He said very quietly, Tessa, our joint checking has $211 in it. Tessa opened her mouth. Tessa closed her mouth. Tessa opened her mouth again. Craig, listen. I was building it for us. It was a surprise. I was going to... Craig held up one hand. Just one hand. He did not look at her when he did it. He kept his eyes on the printed paper in front of him. Tessa's hand, the one holding the mimosa, began to tremble. A small, fine tremble. The kind you only see if you are watching for it. I was watching for it. The orange juice in the glass made small concentric circles, the way water does in a glass on a train. Lauren spoke next. Lauren, 29 years old, the cousin who had been the flower girl at my wedding, set her napkin on the table. She folded it once. She placed it beside her plate, and she said in a clear voice, I sent Marguerite the text you sent me, Tessa, about Walter's pension, about what Marguerite owes you. I sent it 3 months ago. Tessa's head snapped toward her. Lauren did not look away. I almost didn't, Lauren said. I sat on it for 2 weeks, and then I thought about Uncle Walter, and I sent it. Helen, at the other end of the table, said, "Oh, Marguerite. Oh, honey." Her voice was the voice of a woman who had just understood a year of small absences all at once. The Patels were holding hands under the table. I could see the angle of their shoulders. Bill had his eyes closed. His jaw was working the way Walter's jaw used to work when he was holding something in. Sam, the 8-year-old, in the small, clear voice that only children have, said to his grandfather, "Why is Aunt Tessa crying? She never cries." And then he said, after a pause, "Grandpa, is Aunt Tessa in trouble?" Bill put his hand on the boy's shoulder. He did not answer. He did not have to. Sam looked down at his biscuit and took another small, careful bite. Diane stood up. Her chair scraped against the hardwood, and the sound was the loudest thing that had happened in 20 minutes. The chair caught on the edge of the rug, and she had to drag it free, and the whole motion was clumsy in a way Diane was never clumsy. She said, "I will not sit here and be..." And I said, without looking at her, in the same voice I had used in 7 federal courtrooms, "Diane, sit down." She sat down. I want to be clear that she sat down before I had finished the next sentence. "Your dental implant bill was $4,200, not $9,600. I have the invoice from Dr. Bremer's office. You took $5,400 from me and you went to Sedona. I have the photos from your Facebook. The red rock formations behind you in the third one are at Cathedral Rock. The hotel charge on your card on file with me posted on October 18th. The dental procedure was on August 2nd. I checked." Diane did not sit so much as fold. Her face went into her hands. Her shoulders did not shake. She just sat very still inside her own hands, the way a child sits when she has decided that being invisible is the only remaining option. Beverly, my oldest friend, who had not spoken yet, said one word from across the table. She said, "Marguerite." That was all. Just my name. The way Walter used to say it. There was a tear sliding down the side of her nose, and she did not lift her hand to catch it. Tessa was crying now. Real tears. I had wondered, in the planning of all of this, whether she would cry, and whether the tears would move me, and I had decided that I would let the question be answered in the room. The tears did not move me. I want to be honest about that. I watched them, and I felt the way you feel watching weather happen through a window. Present, observant, untouched. She said, "Marguerite, please, please. We can talk about this in private. We can fix this. I can pay you back. I can transfer it right now. Craig, tell her I was going to..." And I said, "We talked in private for 4 years, Tessa. This is the part that happens in front of everyone." She put her face in her hands. Her cream cashmere sleeve picked up a streak of mascara from her cheek, and I watched the streak spread into the weave of the fabric. Craig was still staring at his phone. He had not moved his eyes from the screen for almost a full minute. When he finally looked up, he looked at me, not at his wife, at me. And he said, "Mom, I didn't know. I swear to God I didn't know." His voice was the voice he had used when he was 11 years old and had broken the laundry room window with a baseball. I looked at him for a long time. I let the look last. I made him sit inside it. I said, "I believe you, Craig. That is its own problem, but I believe you." He nodded once. He set the phone face down on the table. He did not pick it up again. 43 seconds passed before anyone spoke. I counted them. The grandfather clock in the hall, the one Walter had inherited from his father in 1981, ticked through them one at a time, and on the 43rd tick, I stood up one more time. I said, "Thank you all for coming. There will be no further discussion at this table today. Tessa, Diane, you may finish your brunch, or you may leave." Either is acceptable. There will be changes starting tomorrow, and I will be in touch with each of you individually about what those changes are. To everyone else, please stay. The biscuits are still warm. I sat back down. I picked up my fork. I took a bite of frittata. It was, I remember thinking, very good. The rosemary was right. Walter would have said so. Tessa and Diane left within 4 minutes. Tessa knocked over her mimosa glass on the way up. Nobody moved to right it. The orange juice spread across the tablecloth toward the laminated sheet that was still face up in front of her chair, and it stopped about an inch from the edge, the way water sometimes seems to choose. They left without their laminated sheets. They left their mimosa glasses on the table. Diane left her fruit salad bowl, the one that was mine. The front door closed behind them with a small click that I felt in the bones of the house. Craig stayed. He moved seats. He sat down next to me, and he did not eat anything else. But he stayed for another 40 minutes, and when everyone else had gone, he helped me clear the table. And at the sink, with the water running, he said, "Mom, what do I do?" And I said, "Craig, you start with one true thing at a time." The week that followed was the quietest week of my life, and also the busiest. On Monday morning at 9, I called the cell carrier and removed Craig's line and Tessa's line and the tablet and the watch from my plan. The agent, a woman in Tucson named Marisol, asked if I wanted to port the numbers. I said that was their problem. She paused for half a second on the other end of the line, and then she said, "Yes, ma'am. Anything else today?" And I told her no. That was everything. On Monday at 10, I called my insurance agent and removed Tessa's SUV from my policy. He said, "Marguerite, are you sure? She'll need to get her own immediately." I said yes. He said it would take effect at midnight. I said midnight was fine. On Monday at 11, I called the leasing company and exercised the co-signer release clause that I had, of course, negotiated into the original lease 4 years earlier, because I am Marguerite Holloway, and I read what I sign. The release required Tessa to refinance within 30 days at her own credit rating. Her own credit rating, as I knew from my audit, was 491. On Monday at noon, I canceled the emergency credit card. The automated system asked me to confirm 3 times. I confirmed 3 times. On Monday at 1, I called a locksmith and scheduled him for Tuesday morning at 8. On Monday at 2, I called a storage facility in Mechanicsville, and I arranged for them to pick up Diane's furniture from my garage on Friday and deliver it to a climate-controlled unit billed monthly to Diane's address on file. The bill would be $189 a month. They would charge her card directly. I had her card on file because she had given it to me to hold during a trip to the Outer Banks 2 summers ago and had never asked for it back. On Monday at 3, I made myself a sandwich. On Monday at 3:15, I took a nap on the couch for the first time in 2 years. By Friday, the garage was empty for the first time in 8 months. The pickup crew came at 10 in the morning, 3 men in green coveralls with the storage company's logo on the breast. They were polite. They were efficient. They wrapped the glass coffee table in furniture pads. They asked me where to sign. They were gone by 11:40. I stood in the garage for a while with the door open. The afternoon light came through the high window at the back, slanted, the color of weak tea, and I could see the place on the concrete where Walter had once spilled a quart of motor oil in 1998 and had spent 2 hours scrubbing with kitty litter and shame. The stain was a dark amoeba about the size of a dinner plate. I had forgotten that stain was there. I had not seen it in years. I crouched down and touched it with 2 fingers. It was cold and slightly grainy. I closed the garage door. I went inside. I made myself a cup of tea, Earl Grey, in the white mug from Charleston. The locks had been changed on Tuesday. The deadbolt on the back door had a new brass faceplate that caught the light differently than the old one, brighter, sharper, the color of a new penny. Diane's spare key, wherever it was, opened nothing now. The fallout, when it came, came in waves. Tessa called me 16 times in the first 3 days. I did not answer. She sent texts that began with "Marguerite, please," and ended with words I will not repeat. She posted on her public Instagram a long caption about boundaries and the season of being misunderstood and the difficult work of becoming who you are meant to be. She did not name me. She did not have to. Within a week, the comments on her posts had shifted. The friends who had cheered every curated photo for 4 years were quieter. Brittany unfollowed her on a Tuesday. 3 of her brand sponsors paused their contracts within 9 days. The leased SUV was repossessed on a Tuesday afternoon in early December because she could not refinance and she could not afford the new payment. The repossession was filmed by a neighbor and ended up in a public Facebook group for our zip code. I did not watch the video. I heard about it from Helen, who called me crying, not for Tessa, but for me, because she said she could not stop thinking about what I had carried alone for so long. I told Helen that the carrying part was over. I told her the standing up straight part had begun. Diane stopped calling Tessa within 10 days. This is the part Tessa, I think, did not see coming. Diane had been an opportunist, not a mother. Once the opportunity closed, the relationship closed with it. By the second week of December, Diane had moved out of the Glen Allen rental and into her sister's house in North Carolina, and she had blocked Tessa's number. Tessa told Craig this through tears. Craig told me on a Thursday evening when he came over alone, as he was beginning to do, with his own coffee from the gas station up the road. He sat at my kitchen counter and he said, "Mom, she has nobody left." And I said, "Craig, that is not the same as me having done something to her." He nodded slowly. He drank his gas station coffee. He said, "I know, Mom. I know." It was the first time in his adult life he had said those 3 words to me in that order, and I noticed. Their condo went into rent arrears within 10 weeks. Without the $743 a month of invisible subsidy, without the emergency card, without me as the cosigner cushion, the math of their life simply did not work. Tessa had to take a part-time job at a boutique in Carytown, folding sweaters for $15 an hour. The Instagram account went quiet for 6 weeks, and when it came back, the aesthetic had shifted. Fewer flat lays, more real-life content, a long post about humility. I did not read it. Lauren told me about it. Lauren and I had brunch every other Saturday now, just the 2 of us, at a small place near her apartment that served biscuits not quite as good as mine. Craig filed for separation in late January. He moved into a 1-bedroom in Short Pump. He started seeing a therapist on Wednesday evenings. He told me this without my asking. And he started visiting me on Thursdays. He always brought his own coffee. He always paid for his own when we went out. He started saying thank you for small things. For a refilled water glass, for a plate of leftovers, for a ride to the body shop when his car was in for service. He said it the way someone learning a second language says a word. Carefully, with attention to where the stress falls. I let him learn. I did not correct him. I did not tell him he was overdue. I just received it, each time, as if it were the first time. Every Monday morning now, I make Walter's French press coffee at 6 in the morning. The grind is medium coarse. The water is just under boiling. The plunge is slow and even, the way he taught me 38 years ago in a tiny apartment in Charlottesville before we were married. I pour it into the white mug from Charleston. The handle of the mug fits my finger the way it always has. I take the newspaper from the porch, the newspaper they still deliver, even though almost nobody reads it on paper anymore, and I sit in the wicker chair where Walter sat the morning he did not stand up, and I do the crossword. The wicker creaks in the same places it always creaked. The silence around me is the same silence that frightened me for 2 years after he died. but the silence is different now, because I am different inside it. The silence is no longer the absence of Walter. The silence is the presence of me. The laminated spreadsheet, the one I distributed to 13 people on a Sunday morning in November, sits in Walter's old cabinet in the dining room. I keep one copy. The rest, I assume, were thrown away by the people who received them. I keep mine in the second drawer from the top, in a manila folder labeled in pencil with the date. Behind it, in the same drawer, is the letter from the mortgage company dated October 2011, congratulating Mr. and Mrs. Walter Holloway on the full satisfaction of their note. The two papers sit together. They are different in almost every way except one. They are both proof that something was completed. The first proof was a thing Walter and I built together over 28 years. The second proof was a thing I built alone in one weekend. Both of them are mine. If you are listening to this, and you are still inside the version of your life where the spreadsheet has not been built yet, where you are still telling yourself that to look closely would be to insult the people you love, I want to leave you with two things I had to learn the hard way. The first is this. I used to think generosity and love were the same thing. I was wrong. Generosity is what you give. Love is what you receive in return. If only one of those is happening, you are not in a relationship. You are in a transaction, and you are the one paying. The second is this. I used to think that being needed was the same as being valued. I was wrong about that too. You can be needed by people who do not value you at all. In fact, the people who need you the most are often the people who value you the least, because your value to them is purely functional, and the moment the function stops, the need disappears, and so do they. Diane disappeared. Tessa, in a different way, disappeared. Craig, in the most important way, did not. This has been the story of a voice note sent to the wrong person, and a spreadsheet built in one weekend, and a Sunday brunch where 13 people learned, at the same time, what one woman had been carrying alone for 4 years. One white mug from Charleston, one laminated sheet of paper, and one French press at 6 a.m. on a Monday. If any part of this story made you stop and add up something you had not let yourself add up before, if any part of it made you recognize the shape of a person in your own life, please tell me in the comments. Tell me what you saw. Tell me what you are deciding. I read everyone. And if you have not yet, please subscribe to this channel because there is someone else out there right now listening to my voice in their kitchen with their hands wrapped around a cup that has gone cold. And they need to find the next story too. Take care of your